Do you recognize this flag? Yes, correct. It's a North Korean flag, and the music that you are hearing at the moment is one of the North Korean song named Defend the Headquarter of Revolution. What do you know so far about North Korea? It's definitely not this one, but more of this one. Most of the people have very little imagination or information about North Korea. Well, let me share some basic information about North Korea. North Korea, which is also known as Democratic People's Republic of Korea, locates in East Asia, constituting the northern part of Korean Peninsula. Pyongyang is the nation capital and the largest city. To the north and northwest of the country is bordered by China and by Russia along the Amnok and Tumen rivers. It is bordered to the south by South Korea with the heavily fortified Korean Demilitarized Zone, which is also known as DMS, separating the two. The history between North Korea and South Korea is complicated. We will not discuss about it right now, but maybe next time. Long story short, both countries don't have good bilateral relationship, and until now their status is in the Cold War. North Korea is one of the world's last hardline communist nations. It officially describes itself as a self-reliant socialist state due to its totalitarian dictatorship. Since its creation in 1948, North Korea has been extremely hostile toward Western nations, especially United States, and has isolated itself from most of the world. The fall of communism in Eastern Europe in 1989 and the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 has deprived North Korea of many important allies and trading markets. The supreme leader of North Korea is Kim Jong-un. The official language of North Korea is Korean, and the number of inhabitants estimated in 2015 is 25,155,317. Furthermore, North Korea is an atheist state with no official religion and where public religion is discouraged. Instead, North Koreans follow cult of personality ruled by the Kim family that has existed in North Korea for decades. The citizens of North Korea are encouraged to worship the supreme leaders as their god. The long regime of the supreme leader has systematically violated human rights, including freedom of thought, expression and religion, freedom of discrimination, freedom of movement and residence, the right to food. The state was also found to have committed crimes against humanity, including extermination, murder, enslavement, torture, imprisonment, rape, forced abortion, and other sexual violence, persecution on political, religious, racial, and gender grounds, the forcible transfer of population, the enforced disappearance of persons, and the inhuman act of knowingly causing prolonged starvation. So that's all the basic knowledge you need to know about North Korea before we dive deeper into the real topic. Have you been wondering whether the tourism industry in North Korea exists? Yes, they do. In fact, the tourism industry, which categorized in service, has the second highest contribution for the GDP of the country. In this video, I'm going to discuss specifically the tourism industry of North Korea. The rising trend of humanitarian crisis in North Korea is hard to be ignored. The video that I'm going to show you will discuss of topic about the humanitarian crisis in North Korea and how tourism industry plays a big role to influence this trend. Would you be interested to visit North Korea? Honestly, I would. It might sound crazy visiting the most mysterious, secretive, and isolated country in the world without any guarantee that you will be able to go in or out of the country. But, as the famous quote by James Stephen states, curiosity will conquer fear more than bravery will. I do believe it's true. In fact, the number of tourists visiting the country is gradually increasing, even though still small and most in careful coordinated package holidays. The surprising fact is North Korea wants to attract 10 times as many tourists to the country in just 2 years, taking the total to 1 million visitors. The country currently welcomes 100,000 tourists a year, the majority of which come from neighboring China. But in tourism drive sanctioned by Kim Jong-un, this figure will reach 1 million by 2017 and 2 by 2020. The country is targeting potential tourists in countries who have good relationship with North Korea, such as Russia, China, and Southeast Asian countries. Before discussing this topic any further, I would like to analyze the tourism industry in North Korea from 3 different perspectives. Namely, the perspective of private tourism industry, the perspective of tourists and locals, and lastly, the perspective of policymakers. First of all, the perspective of private tourism industry such as tour operators, accommodation, and transportation. Did you know that you cannot travel to North Korea independently? Tourist travel in North Korea is only possible as part of a guided tour. It is organized by one of several state-owned tourism bureaus including Korea International Travel Company, KITC, Korean International Sports Travel Company, KISTC, Korean International Taekwondo Tourism Company, KITTC, and Korean International Yacht Travel Company known as KIYTC. There are only 30 tour operators all over the world who specialize organizing trips to North Korea. No matter which company you decided to book with, all tour operators are hosted on the background of North Korean state-owned travel companies. In addition, mostly you will be traveling in groups, but of course you can hire a private guide if you hate traveling in groups. The average number of tourists per group each company takes will vary considerably, so you may want to ask about this before booking a trip. Tourism in North Korea is highly controlled by the government, and only about 1,000 Western tourists allowed to visit North Korea each year. Citizens of South Korea normally not permitted to visit North Korea. In addition, there have been reports of difficulties regarding Israeli, American, and Japanese nationals. Most people traveling to North Korea will travel through Beijing, but you can also enter North Korea through Rason or Namyang via Nanjing, China, or Dumangang City via Kazan, Russia. The duration of the trip ranging from 3 until maximum 10 days. The offered price is €900 until 3,000 per person. Indeed, it is not a budget holiday. Your tour guide will take your passport and keep it during your stay in North Korea, or at least for the first couple of days of your tour. They say it is for security reasons or simply because your entry and exit dates must be registered. Make sure your passport looks decent and doesn't differ from most common passport from your country. Are you wondering how is the hotels look like in North Korea? For your information, North Korean hotels are classified into different standards according to North Korean rating. The concept of star is not used. True, there is an equivalent way to rate the quality of the accommodation in North Korea available to travelers. Luxury hotels are the equivalent of 5-star hotels, though there is one hotel that is above this range, the Hyangsan Hotel. The first-class hotels are equivalent of 4-star hotel, and second-class hotels are the equivalent of 3-star hotels. There are 9 hotels in Pyongyang and 14 hotels located in provincial cities and 2 hotels in region-free economic zone. Furthermore, there are many complaints from the guests of the hotels in North Korea due to the underrated service and facilities provided by the hotels. By far, you may also wondering how to travel within the country. Is there any public transportation, or is it even possible to rent a car? The answer is yes and no. Yes, there are different types of public transportation in North Korea, and no, you cannot rent a car by your own. As I already mentioned before, that you don't have a freedom of movement in North Korea. All your transport needs will be taken care by your tour operator company. Most of the time, this means buses. If you are traveling in a small group, it is also possible to organize a walk through some areas of Pyongyang with some travel agents. Besides, usually the tour operator also arranges a trip to ride a metro in Pyongyang, so the tourists have a chance to blend with the locals. The North Korean metro is known as the deepest underground system in the world. Special form of transportation in North Korea, such as trams and trolleys in Pyongyang, can be chartered through the tour operator. But use of any other form of local public transportation is generally impossible. Furthermore, due to the full constraint and the near absence of private automobiles, have relegated road transportation to a secondary role. Automobile transportation is further restricted by a series of regulations. According to North Korean exile Kim Ji-ho, unless a driver receives a special permit, it is forbidden to drive alone, which means that the driver must carry passengers. Other permits needed are military mobilization permit, a certificate of driver training, a fuel validity document, and a mechanical certificate. All the cars you see are owned by institutions, some companies and certain public unions. Some belongs to athletes and movie stars and Korean politicians who left the country and come back. Cars like these are privileged gift, but normal people cannot buy a car. It has to be gift from a country. Moreover, the Korean State Railway is the only rail operator in North Korea. Because of lack of maintenance on the trail infrastructure and vehicle, the travel time by rail is increasing. There is only one class on the international train between Beijing and Pyongyang, soft sleepers. It can be booked at the station in Beijing, but reservation must be made several days in advance. Your tour agency will usually do this for you unless you are traveling on work purpose. There is also a direct rail link into Russia, crossing the North Korean or Russian border at Tumangang or Kasan. This trip takes 9 days. North Korean officers come into the train to check the passport and give it to the tour guide. North Korean officers also do a manual check of the entire luggage and will ask you to look at some of the pictures taken in North Korea. Immigration procedure in North Korean side are taken on the train or before boarding the bus. Taking picture from the train was initially not permitted, although there have been some slight flexibility regarding this. Taking the train offers an excellent chance to be able to mingle with North Koreans of all walks of life who will be going to or return from China. Having small-sized groups too also means that the chance of sharing your compartment with local North Koreans are much higher, which transportation by plane. Air Koryo and Air China fly into and out of North Korea. Many travelers see the Air Koryo flight as a key part of the beginning of their North Korean experience, and this is tangible as soon as they step on the aircraft. such as listening to propaganda music, seeing the retro decoration and the mystical fog, and reading a copy of Pyongyang Times. The only other airlines with scheduled service to North Korea is Air China, a member of Star Airlines, which fly 3 times weekly from Beijing to Pyongyang. Neither Aeroflot or China Southern continue flight to North Korea anymore. In this section, I'm going to discuss tourism in North Korea from the tourist and locals' point of view. There are several blogs and videos that can be found on YouTube about the trip to North Korea. Here is one example of a tourist who have visited North Korea. Fortunately, I have a friend who is willing to make a video for me in order to talk about his experience visiting North Korea.
Hi there, I'm Malte, and I went to North Korea in 2013. And the reason for that was, on the one hand, that I've got 2 travel buddies and we like to see different places where we assume that people think differently than we do, and on the other hand, maybe society works in a different way than in our country. And the other aspect for us was that on New Year's Eve 2012, so 3 months before we went, Kim Jong-un announced that he wanted to open up the country, and then we reckoned then the country would change quite a lot. So we booked a flight before he could do so, and actually the whole situation changed quite rapidly, because then in March he ended the peace agreement with South Korea, and technically the 2 Koreas were at war again. Anyway, my experience was exciting. We landed there on my birthday, actually, and it was like traveling back in time, because that's what I would imagine going back to Hitler Germany would be like. As you probably know, we weren't able to move freely, but we were always picked up by 2 guides. And we were pretty lucky with those guides, because they were our age. One of them was 24 and the other one was 26. And we could talk to them about everything. They were very open and very friendly, and also they had a great sense of humor, I'd say. The only thing we couldn't talk to them about was the fact that Kim Jong-un and Kim Jong-il were godlike, and they had created everything, and they were outstanding figures in history. There was no doubt for them about that. But they said, yeah, we know that we are, economically spoken, we are very poor, and you've got more technology in your country, but that's fair enough. We, the North Koreans, have the right mindset. And we stayed in Pyongyang for a while, and we went to the mountains in the north, and we also went to Kaesong and the DMZ. And it was absolutely interesting. I have never seen anything like that before, because it was so different from Germany and from all the other countries I've seen so far, and I've traveled quite a lot. We always had to take our bows in front of statues, and we had to follow very specific rules regarding pictures of statues and pictures of the great leaders. And we were kind of isolated, because we couldn't really talk to North Koreans at all, and we were always picked up and brought to sites in order to see them, and his speeches about them and so on. And nevertheless, we didn't feel imprisoned or anything. We rather felt that they tried to show us the most beautiful perspective onto their country, of course. Of course, our guides weren't critical or anything. They just stuck to the official text, to the official textbook. But the experiences we had were outstanding. For example, when we drove up to the Friendship Museum, the International Friendship Museum, or whatever it's called, it started to snow, and they hadn't planned for that. So on the way to that International Friendship Museum, there were only 2 cars on the whole 170 kilometers motorway. And then we were snowed in, and we had to stay longer than we had planned for. And we went into a big hotel where the power had gone, and it was only lit by candles, and we had to find our way to the restaurant only using candles. And it was quite funny, actually. And on the way back, 2,000 or even 3,000 people, farmers mostly, had cleared the motorway, or at least one lane, of the snow. They'd swept away the snow so we could pass with our coach. I've never seen anything like that. They only had, some of them had shovels, but the others just had boards to clear away the snow. It was crazy. Yeah, I could talk more about my specific experiences if you want, and what we did and what we saw, but generally I'd say um, for me as a tourist, it was a great experience, not for leisure, but rather in terms of seeing a very interesting out of space place, and to learn about politics and about, most importantly, about daily life in North Korea. So I think your other question was the ethical issue. And we talked about that quite a lot, because our friends, and especially our parents, were not very happy with our decision to go to North Korea, and asked whether we were safe on the one hand, but on the other hand also whether we really wanted to support the North Korean regime with our money that we bring into the country. And we discussed that, and then we thought there are not many countries that are left if you start to ask that question. For example, if you go to the US, you also go to a state where there's death penalty, for example, and there are many political issues in the US that I wouldn't support. Of course, that's not a fair comparison, because the US is not a dictatorship or anything. It's very much like Germany, probably. But so that wasn't really the question for us, whether we support the government there. Also because it's very little money that we brought into the country. It's not as if we sold them anything, or they sold us anything, except for tickets and hotels and transfers. So yeah, we didn't think that that was really important. And then friends also asked us whether it's not a bit too much like going to a zoo and looking at people who are poor, like catastrophe tourism. I do understand that, but then again, we also felt that our presence there made people quite happy. They waved at us, and even though we couldn't communicate verbally, we were always greeted very friendly, and we felt that everybody was very curious to see us. It wasn't like they thought we were tourists who are there to look at them and laugh about their problems or their lifestyle or their daily life or anything like that. And also after that, we thought that's an illusion, but while we stayed there, we thought, wow, we can talk so openly, so frankly to our guides, that they must somehow understand our way of living and our philosophy and our values, and some of it must rub off onto them. Of course, that's not true. I mean, we weren't there to bring democracy to North Korea or anything. But fair enough, that's what we felt when we were there. So after that, we've also been to other countries like Iran and Russia and Azerbaijan and other countries where you might think that the same question would arise, but for us, that's not an issue. Okay, so those were just very brief answers about your questions. If you've got any other questions, or if you would like me to go more into depth regarding some special issues, just write me a message or give me a call. And yeah, I'm curious to hear from you and hear what you find out in your research. All the best from Germany. Bye.
The third section of this video is going to discuss the tourism industry from the perspective of public sector, meaning the policymaker such as national or global, and also non-governmental organization, or also known as NGO. A number of non-governmental organization, non-profit charitable institution, which also known as NGO, have been active in North Korea since the mid of 90s. Although their work is relatively limited in scope, a relatively recent trend is that a growing number of NGOs, particularly in South Korea, are run by or have North Korean defector on staff. Non-government organizations active in North Korea have stirred some controversy. Some observers believe that NGOs' projects represent one of the few ways to improve the life of ordinary North Koreans, and that their work provides first-hand account about social conditions in North Korea. Some NGOs have a comparative advantage in dealing with North Korea, with over a decade's experience working with North Korean officials and institutions. After all of this interesting information regarding the tourism in North Korea, the ethical question arises. Is it ethically right to visit North Korea since the money generated from tourism industry does not support the local community? And how the tourism industry influenced the humanitarian crisis in North Korea? In the theory, the tourists who visit North Korea putting money in the pocket of a degenerate, murderous state with just about the worst human rights record in the world. In my opinion, there is nothing wrong to visit North Korea, as tourism helps improve local views of foreigners, which following decades of isolation and propaganda about the dissonance and vulgarity of Western capitalism is a good thing. Some go even further and suggest that tourism has potentially subserved a fact that interaction with foreigners shown North Korean citizens just how far behind they are from the developed world, eventually influencing them to question their government's intention more. On the other hand, some people see tourism in North Korea as negative. They often argue that tourism industry support the regime while spontaneously providing it with much needed foreign currency. And it is argued that because tourism is a state industry, tourist dollar may be being used to help fund North Korea's nuclear and missiles program.